What's going on, guys? Today we're going to talk about the Mavic 2. I'm going to give you the latest updates and what you can expect from this drone in the video coming up.
Yeah, I need you right now. So don't let me down. I think I'm losing my mind now.
Hi guys, my name is Brett Garamella, and on my channel I focus on photography and drones. So if you haven't done so, please subscribe below and let's get right into this video. So a lot of people have been anticipating the release of the Mavic 2, or you might want to call it the Mavic Pro 2. We don't know for sure the name of it. There's been one photo in particular released that showed Mavic 2, but it's all speculation. There's been a lot of speculation. There was an event supposedly called See the Bigger Picture event, and a lot of people thought, including myself, see the bigger picture meant it was going to be a bigger sensor similar to the Phantom 4 Pro being a 1-inch sensor. Obviously, a lot of people love the Mavic Pro, but one small caveat to that is they wanted a bigger sensor, something like the Phantom 4 Pro. So perhaps this next DJI drone will have the best of both worlds. There's also been talk of having 2 drones. There's also been talk of DJI having a normal drone and possibly an enterprise drone. Okay, some of these photos were shown online. Whether it's from DJI or not, we don't know for sure. Okay, it doesn't really quite feel like a DJI design. All right, there's been talk of something on top like a speaker, an LED light, perhaps a thermal camera. But this is all speculation. My guess is that they'll just come out with 2 drones. Maybe down the line they'll come out with a Mavic 2 Enterprise drone. But I would just anticipate they come out with 2 drones, one with the current sensor and one with the much larger 1-inch sensor. So obviously with technology, everyone wants the best technology right now, but things take time, all right? Engineering, research, design, this all takes time. So my feeling is that DJI wants to make this drone really good since it's so highly anticipated. They don't want to come out with the drone and it needs a ton of firmware updates. All right, they recently released the Ronin S in limited quantities because it required a lot of firmware updates to be used with various manufacturer lenses and cameras. So with this Mavic 2, I expect DJI to spend a lot of time, make sure it's just right before they make the announcement. That way when they ship it out, it's going to be really good. They're going to get a lot of positive reviews and buzz, and people are really going to enjoy this drone. My gut feeling is that this drone will be released by the end of the summer. So let's get into the specs and details of what we might see in this DJI drone. Okay, let's start by talking about sensor size. The current Mavic Pro has a 1/2.3 inch sensor. The Phantom 4 Pro has a full 1-inch sensor. My guess is that they would like to incorporate this sensor technology of the Phantom 4 Pro in the new Mavic 2 or the new Mavic Pro 2. So my guess is that there will be 2 drones and you'll have 2 different sensor sizes. That way they can price them at different price points. Thinking about this idea of having a 1-inch sensor on a small drone leads me to believe that won't this put out the business of all the Phantom 4 Pros? I mean, people, why would you buy a bigger drone if you can have all that image quality in a much smaller drone, right? Much like the Mavic Air, but even better. So DJI obviously wants to make money. They're in the business of making money and they're very good at it. So my guess is that they wouldn't make the Mavic 2 so good that people wouldn't want to still buy the Phantom 4 Pro. So one thing that the Phantom 4 Pro has is a mechanical shutter. And the Mavic Pro has an electronic shutter. So my guess is that the Mavic 2 would still have that electronic shutter. They wouldn't put a mechanical shutter. One, because it would be too costly, maybe too big and difficult to put in. I'm not sure, I'm not an engineer. But my guess is that they stick with the electronic shutter. Now, what is the difference between an electronic shutter versus a mechanical shutter? Okay, electronic shutter basically it opens and closes electronically rather than having a piece of metal that actually, or an actual hardware that opens and closes the shutter. So because it's electronic, it has these little like bands across, or some people call this a rolling shutter, and this leaves little lines or bands across the image, both for video and photo. However, in most cases, it happens so quickly and it's so discreet and done, the technology is so good, you can't really distinguish the difference between a mechanical shutter and an electronic shutter. So my guess is that we'll have the electronic shutter. You may still have some of this banding in photos or video, but for the novice or the beginner or the hobbyist, it will be so subtle or so indistinguishable that they won't even know that it exists. However, this is such a small issue that to me it's not a big thing. So speaking of the Phantom 4 Pro and the Mavic Air, which both have a very fast processor, I think the Mavic 2 will also have a very fast processor. So what does this mean? This means that it can transfer data at a very fast speed, especially for video. So the Mavic Air and the Phantom 4 Pro have a bit rate of 100 megabytes per second. This means it can transfer video at 100 megabytes per second, whereas the Mavic Pro only transfers data at 60 megabytes per second. So because this new drone can transfer data at a much faster pace, the image quality is going to be much better. And where you really notice the difference is with video. For photos, it doesn't really matter, but for videos, because there's so much information being passed on, it makes a huge difference. So I think you're going to see amazing video quality from the Mavic 2. All right, as a natural progression, talking about sensors, processors, let's talk about the actual specs. What video and photo specs can we see? Because that's the things that people usually talk about. Give me megabytes, give me frames per second, all right? You'll definitely see at least 1080 at 120 frames per second. Some talk has been up to 240 frames per second at 1080. I don't know if this is gonna happen. However, we're gonna see at least a minimum of 1080 high definition video at 120 frames per second, up to 120 frames per second, much like the Mavic Air and the Phantom 4 Pro do right now. Also, like the Phantom 4 Pro, you might see 60 frames per second at 4K. So whether you can shoot 4K at 60 frames per second or only up to 30 frames per second, I'm not sure, but my guess is it would be one of the two. I'm not sure, but for sure you're gonna see 1080 at up to 120 frames per second. Now wait a minute, what about photos? What about all you photographers out there, okay? We're gonna see for photography, we're gonna see at least 12 megapixels. Now for me, anything more than 12 megapixels isn't a huge deal. I know everyone is all obsessed about megapixels, but actually for cinematic quality and for photos, two things are more important. One is the sensor size, and two is being able to shoot in RAW. So with this new drone, you're obviously going to be able to shoot in DNG RAW, and you're also going to be able to shoot with a 1-inch sensor. So that's going to make more of a difference for your photo. Having a 1-inch sensor is going to give you much better resolution for being able to print bigger and showing a really nice background blur and image quality for your photos. However, for you megapixel lovers, I'm not sure whether they're going to put a 20 megapixel or a 24 megapixel sensor. I think it's going to be at least 12 megapixels, but it could be higher. One thing to remember, if you have a lot of megapixels, if you have like a 24 megapixel or 36 megapixel camera, that's not going to be as good in low light as like a 12 megapixel camera. So the fewer the megapixels, the better the image quality in low light, especially for video, but also with photos. So if it was only 12 megapixels, I wouldn't be really dissatisfied with that, because 12 megapixels, I know on a bigger sensor, I'd be able to get really good image quality in low light. All right, so with this nice new camera on the Mavic 2, one thing I'd like to see is the camera a little elevated more off the ground. So the Mavic Pro is so low to the ground, if you have it down when you land, if you're facing the camera down at 90 degrees when you land, you run the risk of actually hitting the ground and damaging your gimbal and your camera, the lens, the front end, when you land. All right, so that's why it's always good to land with it straight up like this. However, it's still so close to the ground, and a lot of people have to buy legs, an accessory, extra legs, just so the camera can be elevated a little higher, so you won't risk damaging it. If there's like a little rock on the ground or something, or a little grass or something, it might hit the front end, and people obviously don't want that. So what I'd like to see is having the drone a little more elevated, but right out of the box. Okay, you can buy the accessories, the little legs to elevate the drone higher, but people don't want that. They want to get the drone right out of the box and have it off the ground so that when they land, they're not going to hit anything and they don't have to worry about that. It gives them a peace of mind. And I believe, or one thing I'd like to see anyway, is on the Mavic 2 having this drone a little higher off the ground, not so low. Another thing about the Mavic Pro camera is, in addition to being low to the ground, it was also kind of flimsy and kind of vulnerable. It's not as sturdy as, say, the Spark drone. So the Spark, you could fly it, bump into things, crash from like eye level down, and that gimbal is going to be perfectly fine. It's a very sturdy gimbal front end that, you know, it's not going to damage very easily. So I'd like to see the Mavic 2 have a much sturdier camera and be a little elevated off the ground a little more. And the main reason why you don't want to damage your gimbal and your camera is because it's the most expensive part of the drone. Having these two things, both elevated off the ground and a sturdier camera, will give people a better peace of mind when using the drone. Another way to give drone pilots a more peace of mind is to have obstacle avoidance all around. So the Mavic Pro only has obstacle avoiding sensors on the front, and the Mavic Air had obstacle avoiding sensors in the front and the back. So with the Phantom 4 Pro, there are obstacle avoiding sensors in the front and back, and on the left and right. And because it has these 4 sensors, it's less likely to hit something. Now what I'd like to see is 360 sensors all around. Because the Phantom 4 Pro has sensors on the left and the right and the front and the back, it's great, but it still has blind spots in right here in the front in these 2 spots and behind in these 2 spots. There's a little area where if you go here, it could still hit something. So I think they're gonna either add a few more sensors, at least 4 sensors I think on this new drone, or maybe sensors that are improved, maybe at a different angle or something like this, where it has 360 obstacle avoiding technology. And one more thing to note is that other companies are now coming out with 360 obstacle avoidance. So you can fly your drone, there's a lot of trees, there's a lot of walls and things you have to navigate around. Your drone won't hit these obstacles. And being that DJI spends so much money on research and design and always has the latest and greatest drones, I would be very surprised if it doesn't have 360 obstacle avoiding sensors. Now let's talk about one of the most important things when flying a drone, the battery life. Okay, with the Mavic Air, you only get 21 minutes. People love this drone, but the 21 minutes is the one downside of the Mavic Air. Having a maximum of 21 minutes can be a bummer, whereas the Phantom 4 Pro or the Mavic Pro Platinum both fly for up to 30 minutes. So people really like having this ability to fly for a long time, up to 30 minutes. So I imagine the Mavic 2 will have a flight time of at least 30 minutes. However, I think they're going to want to make it even better. So the new technology, I imagine this drone will fly anywhere from 32 to 35 minutes. 35 minutes seems like a really long time, so I want to be a little more conservative in my estimation. So I think it's gonna be about 33 minutes. So you're gonna get about 33 minutes maximum of flight time, which means in normal conditions, it's usually a little less because of how you fly it and whether there's wind and things like that. But still, you're gonna get upwards like 28, 29, 30 minutes of flight time in a small drone with a big sensor. This is incredible. There's been some photos online of the Mavic 2 having a separate stabilizer. Much like the GoPro Karma, which had a drone and a stabilizer where you could walk around and capture video with your GoPro, I think the Mavic 2 will also have this feature. I don't know in both drones, but in one of them, it's gonna have the feature where you can actually detach the camera. You can put it on the Osmo, and then you can walk around and get great stabilized footage. This is a huge upside. Any vlogger or person who wants to get run and gun footage or doesn't want to carry around their DSLR camera or their other Osmo separately, they just want to have a small little device that they can get stabilized footage. I think this Osmo Mini, all right, I'm gonna call it an Osmo Mini because I don't know what else to call it. And I don't think it's gonna be as complex as the whole Osmo series. So there's the Osmo Plus, the Osmo Pro, the Osmo Mobile. All these things, all these stabilizers have great features. However, I don't think this Osmo Mini is going to be as complex because DJI doesn't want to make this stabilizer so good that people don't want to buy those other Osmos, okay? Because obviously they're in the business of making money, they make great products, but they don't want to have everyone buy one product and not another. So I think this Osmo Mini is going to be a great complement for a vlogger, but ultimately this is a huge selling point. Being able to get video both with a drone and on the ground with a stabilizer in one package that you can put in a small bag, people are gonna love this. All right, the last thing I anticipate on the Mavic 2 would be a better gimbal cover holder, right? On the Mavic Pro, there's this big plastic, like dome-shaped cover that covers the front end or the lens of the drone. So when you're traveling, it doesn't bump into anything. And then you take that off, and then underneath there's this little clamp that basically keeps the gimbal in place and it doesn't shake around, okay? I think the Mavic 2 will be much like the Mavic Air, where you have one piece instead of two pieces. So that one piece will both be a gimbal holder and a camera protector. So you'll be able to slide it off and put it back in with just that one piece. And you'll be able to keep your gimbal in place, and you'll be able to keep your camera protected when you travel. All right, one last thing I'd like to mention. I think the lens is gonna be a little wider. So with the Mavic Pro, you have a 28mm wide lens, whereas with the Phantom 4 Pro and the Mavic Air, you have a 24mm lens. Now the 24mm lens is your standard wide angle lens. 28 is a little more in, and the advantages of a 28, you might get a little less distortion. However, the 24mm lens I think is a little more desirable because you get a wider shot, and I think people will like that, especially with a drone that you'll be able to fly really fast, have a long flight time, you can maneuver and get in the position. But being able to have a little, that extra 4mm I think does make a difference, and I think people are going to be happy about having a little wider camera angle. All right guys, thanks for watching to the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to press that like button. If you haven't done so, subscribe to my channel so you can get more videos like this about drones, about photography. When the Mavic 2 comes out, I'll be releasing more videos about that drone. And don't forget to share this with a friend, add a comment below. And remember, siempre pa'lante, nunca para atrás.